What's good? Thank you so much for tuning into this bonus interview episode of The Newest Olympian. My name is Mike Schubert. I'm the titular Newest Olympian. I'm a 33-year-old man who never read the Percy Jackson books as a kid, but I read them as an adult because I was on a quest to determine if society had been sleeping on the series, and then I covered season 2 of the TV show to see if society was missing out on that, and I am happy to say I think season 2 is a big hit, and there are many reasons why, and I think that one major reason is the costuming, and I'm so excited to announce that at long last, I will be presenting you this interview right now. We are joined today by the costume designer for Percy Jackson in the Olympian Season 2. It's Catherine Adair. Catherine, how's it going?
Great. Absolutely great. It's lovely to finally get together with you.
Yes, it has been many, many months in the making. We met when we were, as the podcast crew, fortunate enough to take a tour of the set for season 2. And you were the first little tour that we had because we got to set. Yeah, we did like a little bit where they were filming the Cersei's/Cece's spa stuff. So we just kind of got set up there. And the first like official tour, because they had us touring all the departments, was your costuming department, and like right off the bat we saw the wedding dress and the Siren's outfit and Luke's tracksuit fit, and it was just like right away we were instantly just hit with stuff that me and the other podcasters were nerding out about. And you gave such a delightful introduction to everything, and probably partially because of me, I think we stayed far longer than they had scheduled because I had so many questions, because I think costuming is so interesting. I think it's so fascinating. And I had so much fun being able to speak with Tish Monahan for season 1, and I could have talked to her for a million years. And now I'm excited to talk to you for a little longer for season 2. But can you just take us all back to like how you became a part of the project and how your work on season 2 began?
Tish, as you know, decided to retire. She and I have a number of mutual friends, and I've been in Vancouver. I've had the privilege of working in Vancouver quite a few times now, so it's sort of a second home, I would say. I know a lot of extraordinary people up there, and I love the mountains. And so I reached out to Tish, and she was great. She set a really wonderful foundation for the series, I think. So the biggest challenge really was she set the bar high, and knowing going in that she had set a high bar, how did I springboard off that and at the same time acknowledge that our cast is nearly 2 years older, and it's a very different story. So their age is different and the story's different, because in season 1, as you know, that everybody's trekking across America, and yes, you have some beasts and some monsters along the way, but almost all of those, with the exception of one, are CGI. And Dan Schatz came to me and said, we've decided that nothing's going to be CGI this year. And I was like, okay, then here we go. And there was some concept art, but concept art is concept art. And I think, with all the conversations that are going on right now, the truth is that it can at least be, again, a springboard. But the clothes and the costumes and the storytelling has to function. The actors have to be able to act in the stuff. The actors have to be able to move in things. And I remember with the giants, and I think I told you this when you came through, originally they were like, and we want the giants on stilts. And I was like, guys, you're going to be in the woods. People running on stilts in the woods is with rocks and trees and branches, and has anyone ever tried doing that? And the proportions are different. So we explored stilts and then came to the platform boots you saw. And Dan Hanna, our wonderful production designer, as you know, had done the Lord of the Rings series, and so knew an enormous amount about false perspective and filming that they'd already worked out on that show. And that helped us immeasurably. So while Tish had given me a canvas to build on, at the same time, and most of the departments were coming back in from season 1, so they were incredibly helpful in terms of the history and the lore and the parameters they had created. I really did have this extraordinary free rein to just dive in and make it my own.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
It's very cool. It's very, very cool. And specifically saying of make it your own. I do remember one of the first stories you told us, which I thought was fascinating, was the bandanas and how they found their way into the series. Do you want to tell folks how that came to be? Because I thought this was phenomenal.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see whether the bandanas continue to have a life. I have a feeling they might. Um, because of the color coding, once I found out from the set decorating department and Hamish, who again, his office was right next door to mine, and I was constantly in there going, "Tell me about this, tell me about this." Once I realized there was all this wonderful color coding between the different houses, I was like, "Well, dude, they all need to have bandanas." And they need to have bandanas in the colors of their houses. And everybody was like, "We've got bigger fish to fry here, Kate. We've got a whole chariot race." And I was like, "Yeah, I want to do bandanas." And again, my showrunners were like, "Kate, we need you to worry about bigger things." And I was like, "Yes, but the bandanas." I was a little devious. I went ahead and designed them over the weekend. And as you know, they have most of the symbols of the different houses on them. And so I worked out the pattern and then handed it over to my sketch artist, who refined it so that it could be turned into a digital file for a silkscreen. And then we had them all silkscreened, and then I took them into my aging and dying shop, which you met, which was manned by Sam and Ellie, just brilliant people. And I was like, "Can we dye these into different colors?" And they're like, "Sure." And so we were filming up on the hill by Thalia's tree. And I was very excited. I got them done, and I needed to check the set anyway. So I drove down. I had them sort of stuffed in a pocket, and I went over to James Bobbin and I went, "James, which color would you like?" And he went, "Oh, darling. Oh, I want a pink one." And Don Schatz was over there, sort of standing just off to the side, and he sort of looked at me like this. Like, I said, "Which color do you want, Dad?" And he went, all right. And of course, then everybody wanted one.
Of course.
When we got to the chariot race, I think it did help because it meant that it gave our actors, and more specifically our extras, our background performers, it gave them some ownership. And it meant when we sat them in the stands, you could have a little gaggle of Aries kids all sort of hanging out together. And it gave them a sense of community, I think, which was really pretty. They'd be like all tough, we're the Aries kids. We got black bandanas. So that was lovely too. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really fun. I think it's a fun thing that feels very camp appropriate. It makes sense for at the chariot races. I agree. Like, I have never been a background actor, but I'm sure it's helpful to have something that informs your character. So it's not just like, I'm somewhat a camp half-blood. It's like, no, I'm in the Hermes cabin, so I'm going to get really excited when the Hermes kids do stuff. Yeah. And I remember when we saw the bandanas that were out on the table, like the first thing, we were all like, all of us, even without saying anything, we were all like, "Are we going to get bandanas?" And we were over the moon delighted to receive some. And I still have mine. It's a prized possession. I didn't even, I have it with me here, but we're flying back to New York in a couple of days, and I was like, put it in the suitcase, zip it up, make sure I don't lose it. Like, I brought it with me to the premiere as kind of like a good luck thing, but I was like, we cannot lose the bandanas. We love them. So
I'm so glad.
I think that's great. Of course. And look, the toughest decision I had to make was, did I want the blue one or the pink one? Because I am in the Poseidon cabin, but pink's my favorite color. It was pretty tough. I think that was probably.
I actually remember you having a big deliberation about this, and I thought it was very charming. I was like, "Oh, she's having a big decision."
I took it seriously. I take
you did.
I take that seriously. I take my accessories seriously. I take clothes seriously. That's why I was very excited about costuming. And from all the stuff we learned from you, it was so cool. I mean, you want to talk about me saying I worry about what socks I wear on stage at a live show, but the thought process that you put into everything and all the attention to detail is so incredible. And I think there's no better example than the wedding dress, which of course has so much anticipation in this season. The fans are so excited to see it. And then there's so much that went into it that you were telling us in terms of making it look like it was truly washed on shore. And then there were the hand-sewn elements, like the hand-sewn doves in there. So can you just describe everything with the wedding dress? Because obviously that is one of the stars of the season.
Yes, and thank you for that. I have been sort of careful how much I've read online. My son read the books growing up, so when I got the interview, I was like, oh, okay. I knew that the story and the books and the series were well loved. I have to be honest, and maybe it was a gift, I didn't realize just how huge.
Yeah.
I don't know that any of us did. I mean, kudos to our showrunners and to Rick Riordan's collaboration with us, that the show has found generationally a whole new audience. I was in Paris just before Christmas. I'd gone to see relatives in England. Just sidebar, there were posters on the sides of the buses.
Yeah.
And often when you're dealing in another language, they'll change the title slightly. So like SpongeBob SquarePants is SpongeBob, literally translated, but it's in French. You know, I grew up in Europe, sorry, but Percy Jackson is still Percy Jackson.
That's awesome. Yeah. And sometimes France does the thing, because I lived in Paris for a bit, where they will still translate something to English, but they will change it to be less complicated. I think there was, I want to, like, one of the movies, I think this was it. It was Game Night, I think, was one that came out in the US, and it was still released in Paris in English, but I think they changed it to like Sexy Game Night, because it's more of like a romance in their movie, but they had to make it like really clear. Like, this isn't just people playing games, there's kissing too. So Percy Jackson's thing as Percy Jackson is good.
Percy Jackson is Percy Jackson. So to get back to the wedding dress, so I knew it was pivotal, but I didn't realize that it had quite the chatter and conversation around it. And luckily, by the time Arian talked to me about it, I'd already designed the costume. But once, thank goodness, because otherwise it would have been too many rabbit holes and I would have been like, ah. Once I saw Dan Hanna's idea for the cave and the treasure and the shipwrecks and all of that, I was like, okay, so it's a wedding trousseau. It has to be a wedding trousseau. And I spent quite a lot of time talking to the showrunners. I liked the idea that it didn't fit perfectly. I liked the idea that you could still see Grover underneath it.
Yeah. Oh, right, because you can still see his T-shirt that he's wearing.
His T-shirt, and I had the T-shirt designed. And then if you look carefully, it has leaves on it.
Yeah, if people, that was one of the coolest things that I think it was hard to see on the show, is that Grover's T-shirt that he's wearing, it's this very autumnal baseball tee is what I would call it, with like the 3/4 sleeves, and it had like the darker burgundy maroon sleeves and then the more like orangey tan chest part. And then it had this little leaf design, which you said you guys made.
Yeah.
Like it's a one of one, like, custom design. Yeah. It's so cool. Things like that with costume, it's like, I want to just like scream it from the mountaintops. Like, if everyone watching the show knew all the stuff we knew, everyone would be like, this is so cool.
Well, that's why you guys are so cool, because you spend the time and the effort, and you also have the access that not everybody does. But given that Grover can talk to trees, and given that he is a woodland spirit in a sense, or has the ability to talk to woodland spirits, leaves just made sense. Anyway, so I knew it needed to be short-sleeved. I knew I wanted to see the T-shirt underneath, and I knew I wanted it to look vintage, but I didn't necessarily want somebody to clock exactly a time period on it. And then if the cave floods occasionally, or it gets wet, or it gets damp, then things that are in damp, musty basements or damp, musty caves do deteriorate just a little bit. And then again, the doves, they were based on some research that I found that I think you saw from my research board.
Yeah.
And again, one of my team was amazing. She just was kind of fascinated with these trapunto birds. And we were talking about them on the Friday. And then Kat came in on Monday and she was like, do you like these? And I was like, where did those come from? And she's actually a brilliant breakdown artist and craftsperson, and was one of my set costumers ultimately, looking after the girls on the set. And she said, well, I thought the doves were cool, and so I just went home and tried felting some. I was like, oh my gosh, as one does, you know.
Yeah, of course. It's a Tuesday night.
You could nap, you could go and get your groceries, or you could make Kate birds, you know. Sure, why not? They just kept making them smaller and smaller, and then we figured the positioning on them. But again, it was sort of a nod to Grover having an affinity for birds and animals and plants and being part of that world. And then
Yeah.
David Matwico, who's my assistant designer for, gosh, he and I've worked together about 10 years now.
Wow.
And the good news, bad news of when I work in Canada is he stays in Los Angeles. And he's also brilliant at construction and pattern cutting. And so anything we can't find in Canada or anything, because the show is so big, goes through him in Los Angeles. So we knew that we had to make it at least 3 of the dresses, which meant volume of fabric. And I wanted the scale to be a little different. So he actually sourced that fabric in Los Angeles. And believe it or not, it's actually curtain fabric.
Oh, interesting.
It's not dress fabric.
Well, is there a reason why, just like the way it looked or the way it moved?
It was the way it looked and the netting, and he knew that, I mean, we had talked extensively about once it got aged and where we could fray it, and a French Chantilly lace probably would have been too delicate.
Oh, yes, of
and
course.
Also this, yeah, and also
I joke. I try. You could say anything, and I'd be like, yeah, totally. Like before, you said it had to be a bridal trousseau, and I was like, I know what that is for sure.
Should we do a lesson on bridal trousseaus?
Please, I would love to learn.
Okay. So in the olden days, and actually still in some cultures and some countries, there would be a hope chest, which would have, people would start to give you, as you came into puberty and maturity, they would start to give you special things to put in a box for when you got married. Little disturbing, but yes.
Sure.
And then separate from that, the wedding trousseau would be, oh gosh, I'm getting married, and a relative or your parents or your mother or your auntie would take you shopping and or commission clothes to be made for the wedding and for the honeymoon or the travel afterwards. So my idea was that whoever this person was who was going to get married, their gloves, their boots, their shoes, their dresses, their wedding dress, their wedding veil would have all been in a trunk, and they would have been going off to get married somewhere else.
And then it fell off the boat. Oh, cool. That makes so much sense, because I guess the lore of it, you're wondering, how does a wedding dress wash ashore? It's usually something that you keep in a closet. Oh, I love it. Yeah. That's so thoughtful. And now we all know what a bridal trousseau is. So anyway, back to the lace that we knew it couldn't be French lace because it wouldn't fray properly, as we all deal with French lace.
It would have been, I mean, it could have been that, but also budget-wise, it would have been, and then,
a little pricey, and then you got to make
so
30.
Having something that was a little bit more rustic, for want of a better word, or had a little more oomph in it, meant that I knew that when we started to fray it and paint into it, there would be more substance there for us to build on.
Okay. Very cool. Well, look, it turned out phenomenally.
Thank you. And then Grover had to move in it too. I mean, that was the other thing.
Very true.
So there were certain shapes that didn't make sense, and there were certain shapes that in that cave, you didn't want it to drown him, and you wanted it to make sense. But I also wanted Ariane to be able to move in it. So there you go.
Amazing. I think it's fantastic. And yeah. Oh, of course. Of course.
That's because of the trousseau.
I love it. I love knowing even more. It's good. So one of the next things that we saw, which I think it's interesting because the wedding dress had so much hype, and obviously people were talking about it, and I believe it lived up to the hype. But then I think what has become, or at least in my circles, has become the most talked about outfit this season is Luke's tracksuit fit that he wears towards the end of the season, with the Greek pattern, the white and the tan, the gold, the popped collars. It's an incredible look. He looks very profound going into the fight. It hits that Luke Castellan preppy boy vibe. I would love to know everything about what went into the decision behind the tracksuit, picking the materials, how that fits into the story, because it's one of those things that was not described in the book, but once you see it, you're like, well, yes, of course, Luke would for sure do this, and he would put on his prettiest clothes before he punches Percy Jackson in the face 5 times.
Of course, because he's Luke, and Charlie has anybody who's met Charlie knows that he's an absolute sweetheart. But he has, the way he carries himself and the swagger that he brings to Luke is just fabulous, right? And not everybody could rock that. But when I first met with Dan and John over Zoom and Zoe, I'm trying to think who else was in the Zoom room. It's always difficult. I had done some mood boards, quite a lot of mood boards. And one of the things I'd come across was a Versace tracksuit. And of course, Versace, like the trousseau, Versace has a recurring theme of the key pattern, the Greek key pattern.
You'll be very proud of Dior, because I asked Dior and Charlie about the fits. It was one of those group interviews for the junket, and it was Ariane Dior and Charlie, and I asked Charlie about Luke's outfits, and the tracksuit came up, and there was a debate where Charlie said, well, it would be Hermes, wouldn't it? Because of, Hermes, Hermes. But Dior instantly clocked. She was like, well, the key pattern, it's Versace. Like, she was right away. She was thinking more, which fashion brand is it actually like? And Charlie was like,
that's
well, what thematically makes sense? She clocked it instantly. So I know you'd be proud of her.
That's my girl. That's Dior. Anyway, so it was originally because Hermes in season 1, when he was in the casino.
Oh, right.
He was in this sort of schlumpy, it wasn't even a tracksuit. It was...
Yeah, it's just like luxury sweats. Like, they are sweatpants, but you look at them and you're like, those are expensive.
They were just sweats, and they actually weren't expensive sweats, but...
Oh, they looked very high quality. Wow.
Well, no, in season 1. And so he already had a history of this kind of, I'm cool. And of course, Lin-Manuel Miranda could wear anything. So you have that in your... So I actually pitched that for him for season 2, for Hermes. And Dan was the one who went, what happens if you do a spin on that for Luke? So I need to credit Dan with that.
Okay, so it was going to be Hermes was going to wear slightly fancier kind of tracksuit, whereas season 1 is more of just like baggier sweats and a hoodie. Season 2, you were saying elevated tracksuit, and then Dan came in. Dan Schatz said, "What if instead?"
You do Luke a version of it. You do a version of it for Luke. So, and it was made from scratch, because then what we did was we tried on different track pants and tracks jackets on Charlie, and I knew I wanted the collar to pop, and I knew I wanted the key design to go through the sleeve, which is actually not as easy to do as you think it is. So
I don't think anything is easy with clothes. I can't. Anytime people do anything, it's fascinating. Like, to anyone who can sew anything, I bow down, because I couldn't, in my wildest dreams, imagine fixing a hole in a shirt. I can't.
So that, and, should we do a track pant that gathered at the bottom, or that was, and did we do a high top sneaker, and all of those things?
Oh, the shoes are super cool. I don't know if people could actually see them, but they're fresh.
And again, that we found one that had the shape that I wanted it to have. But then again, those are all hand painted. And so that we changed the logo and the shape and all of that, so that they're a brand, but they're not a brand anymore that you would go, oh, that's that's Adidas.
Adidas, whoever, Nike, whoever. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I stand corrected, though. I misspoke. This is the one he wears earlier in the season that we're talking about. This is like when he stabs the tree, and then he has the later season fit with more of the, I don't know what kind of jacket you would call it, but it was like a brushed suede kind of thing with
it was a brush suede. It wasn't a real suede,
yes.
But you get a gold star. It was a brush. It was a fabric that was designed to look like a brush suede. And once we'd figured out the pop collar, we had to find something else that had a popped collar. And we played with, do we keep him light as the villain, or do we go dark? But I love how the costume sort of blends with the terrain when you're on the island.
Mm-hmm.
So
it does fit really well.
that was a lucky thing.
It looks really cool. It all fits because everything's in that kind of, tan, beige, gray,
Hmm.
gold. Like it feels Luke, of course, especially how he's described in the book, like he would be the type to have a very coordinated closet. So it feels incredibly true to his character.
I'm sure if you went into his closet, it would all be color coordinated. It would
Oh,
be, this is
yes.
what I wear for this, and this is what
Hmm.
I wear for this, and this is what I wear for this.
And I respect it.
Um,
That's what I did. Like my closet. It's funny. I'm at my parents' place right now, so I'm recording this out of my sister's closet. Which is all like mostly empty and stuff. But my closet that I used in my high school and college years, which was here, I had it full. Like it was very organized. I had formal stuff on the left because it was one of those closets kind of had three bars. Formal stuff was on the left. Everything else was in the middle from rainbow order. Brown, red,
mhm.
orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, all the way, whites and blacks, and then it was all like outerwear on the right side. So like I respect and appreciate an organized closet. You don't want to be wasting time trying to find what's in there. You got to go
No,
in and be like,
no, yeah.
I'm gonna go stab a tree. I need my gold and white tracksuit. Here's the shirt.
And
Here's
everybody
the
needs to
jacket.
know that who I am, and yeah,
Exactly. Got to make it clear.
absolutely.
So obviously Luke as well, he fully embraces being on the Princess Andromeda. He wears the boat shoes, which I have long, me personally, I despise boat shoes. I think that they are ugly and hideous, but to each their own, just not for me. But it speaks so perfectly to his character because obviously as the preppy boy he is, he would wear them. Being on a
Hmm.
boat, he would wear them. So I was delighted when we went through the costuming to see that he had boat shoes as part of the official
Oh yeah.
boat outfit. But he also had this lovely nautical sweater and the skinnier jeans. What went into the boat fit for Luke? Because I think that's another one
Well,
that's one that's
that was
anticipated.
that was from the very beginning. That's on the early concept boards that I did when I first met with them. I was like,
Okay.
if he's going on the boat, he's this style hound. Um, and even his costume, the early ideas I had for him were all very preppy bro boy. All of
Hmm.
it was. So yes, all of that sort of nautical themed for the Andromeda was from the very beginning. I was like, guys, if he's going to go on the ship and he's going to take over the ship, this is what he'd do. He wouldn't bother
Yeah.
with the captain's, jacket
No.
with the crest or anything. He'd just be, again, Mr. Cool.
Yeah.
Mr.
I think it
Elegant
worked.
Cool.
Mr.
Yeah.
Elegant
Oh,
Cool.
good.
I
I'm
mean, like
glad.
it was very cozy. It was very Polo Ralph Lauren, like the big,
Yep.
cable knit. It just,
Hmm.
again, it was one of those things you see and you're like, yep, that's exactly what he would wear. Absolutely
Hmm.
perfect. You spoke of people on boats, people who wore different things. I think a more intense costuming, just because of all the diversity of it, was the crew that Clarice leads. And we've got people from all different eras. It was switched from the books to something I think was very fun, which was people from all different eras who have lost in naval battles. Now, obviously, this makes a larger undertaking for you and your team. So what all went into making everyone's different naval outfits, and then also Mitch from Blockbuster in the Lost Streaming War?
Yeah, because of the Lost Streamers, which was, of course, a huge writer's inside joke. Yeah, I should really, for your audience, I should explain. I was lucky enough to be able to have two assistant designers. So while David Matwico, who's been a colleague for, as I said, for 10 years, was based in LA, then Annie Golden, who worked with me, gosh, all the way back to Man in the High Castle season 3 and season 4, was then his counterpart in Vancouver. And
Okay.
she, for the most part, not completely, but where David helped drive the train for me creatively, Annie helped drive the train logistically. And then Brittany, who I think you met briefly,
Yeah.
she was like command central for all of the pieces of the puzzle in terms of the budget, in terms of who we needed where, when, how we were tracking the money, how many people we had in any one piece of the department, because as you know, the department was very busy.
Super
The
busy. So
Ironclad,
many moving parts.
super busy, so many moving parts, which of course is a costume designer's dream and nightmare. You wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh my gosh, did I remember this? Did I remember that? And at the same time, if you ask any of us, we absolutely hunger for the privilege of designing a show like Percy. The ironclad came so close on the heels of the beginning of the show, and our workroom in Vancouver was already cranking out an enormous amount of clothing and
Yeah.
aging and distressing and crafts because of the giants. And there
Right.
was a minute where we were also looking at some other creatures that in the end we didn't make. And so actually, again, David Matuiko ran with a big piece of the ironclad, because once they'd realized they wanted sailors from all these different time periods, then actually he and I were the ones who went, well, you can have this battle, and you can have this battle, and you can have this battle. And he sourced a huge amount of the options and what they looked like, because we wanted to make sure there was a good balance of them. And I was up to my eyeballs with making sure that giants didn't kill themselves in the woods. So he and I would talk literally every morning, and then at least anywhere between 2 and 10 times a day. And once Craig and the rest of them had decided that that's what they wanted to do with the ironclad, I was like, okay, go do the research, find the images, let's put them together, let's show them to the team, let them decide who they want, what they want, how they visually balance each other. And then Craig adapted some of the writing to fit with what we had given them and what they liked.
Cool.
So then I would say about half of those costumes were made in Vancouver, and the other half were actually made remotely. And then everything came up to Vancouver to be aged and distressed and broken down. Again, hats off to, quite literally, to David, who's the other half of my brain most of the time.
Amazing.
And his attention to detail. So all of that lovely gold bullion you see on, the gold bits here and here, especially on the British and the French sailors.
Captains, yeah.
And captains of battles they lost. All of that he sourced. Every single piece of it.
That's awesome. Yeah. Such a fun thing that the season brought in. Mm-hmm. I think everyone really enjoyed it. All the looks were fantastic. It was fun because a lot of these characters, pretty much all of them, you don't really get this, or I guess you get a little bit of the explanation of who they are, but it doesn't come until a little bit in. So I know that there are some super, whether it's war nerds or mythology nerds or fashion nerds, were watching that. And Emily, for example, one of the podcasters who you met as well, she was pausing and being like, well, that looks like from this war, so I bet this was that. Like, that's the kind of stuff that there's certain people that really got over the moon excited for it. And then there's me, who's just like, that French guy's jacket is cool. But like, it all hits on different levels, but it looks so good.
I think I said to you when we bumped into each other on opening night, and I said, for costume designers and for the world that I inhabit and the craftspeople and the people who back somebody like me up, you guys are really special. That comes from my heart.
Oh, thank you.
Because you are curious and you are intrigued with the attention to detail. And for the times that somebody says to somebody like me, oh, Kate, it doesn't matter, just make them a bunch of sailors.
No.
Exactly. No, because there will be the nerd who goes, so the time and effort and days and hours that David spent and that I spent with him, where we went, no, this costume was worn at this sea battle when it was lost. And if you want somebody in red and somebody in blue, even if those colors get broken down because they need to be aged, what's the color balance? And if you want a red jacket, it can't be a red coat, because the red coats they were on land. And if these are sailors and they're seafaring people, they need to be seafaring people. And I think because we live in a world that's so visual now, where we have the internet and we can ask Google anything, and we don't even have to go to the library anymore unless we really want to.
Right.
We can type in, National Gallery, London, show me naval officers, and boom, everything comes up. It does make a difference.
Yeah,
it does.
I think there's a lot of similarities between what you do with costuming and what your team does, and what happens with me and my editor for my podcast, Sherry, doing audio editing stuff. It's one of those things where you might not notice when it's done really well, but you absolutely notice, and it completely takes you out of it when it's done poorly. And if there's a really clunky edit or a very out of place costume, it's just something that can completely take you out of what you are consuming, and then that just like ruins it. But when you do things, you've established in the show, the show is established that these are all naval officers who have lost battles. Like, when it all looks correct, you're like, yeah, but you're exactly right. If someone shows up in an outfit from a winning side of the war, or someone in an outfit that wasn't on the sea side of the fight, then it's going to completely take you out of the believability of a show that has lots of other magical elements. You want to feel bought in, and it'll take you out of it.
Yes.
So I think it can be underappreciated, but it really does add to the legitimacy of the story you're trying to tell.
I'll often get into this with people who are trying to rush everything along, and they're like, oh, it's just the background. No, it's not just the background. Because to your point, Mike, there will be somebody, and they could be 4 or 5 years old, who'll go, why is that in the background there? What is that? Why is that there? That's not right. And they may not be able to tell you what would be right, but it doesn't mean to say, to your point, that it isn't going to take them out of the story, and it isn't going to disrupt the magic of that storytelling.
Yeah, no, completely.
Besides which, the research is so cool. I mean,
It's so fun and fascinating. Yeah.
It's so fun. And then you've got backstory, and then you've got, no, Clarice should absolutely be in a leather jacket. She needs to echo her dad, but I'm not going to put her in a trench coat. And I don't want it to be something that somebody can say, oh, she found that at such and such a department store 2 years later. So no, we have to make it. Absolutely, we have to make it. And then we'll see how many people knock it off in the department store, a year or 2 years later. That's a different story.
And then all of the people trying to cosplay at future events as the characters that are established in the outfits that you and your team have set up, then that's the thing of everyone trying to find the jacket that looks most like it. And then like I was Googling earlier the tracksuit image, and there's already popping up people trying to make fake ones that you can buy online. Like that is the influence. People are trying to get Luke's jacket already.
So a week after I saw you in LA, because in LA we only had episode 1.
They only had shown 1 at the premiere, and then I at that time had only seen 1 through 4 from press junket access.
Okay, when I got to London, because it was a week later, they actually screened episodes 1 and 2. They sort of reversed what we had in LA. They had a reception beforehand.
Oh, interesting.
There was a gal trying to get a photograph of some of the posters and some of the layout. They did a very cool job. I was a little bit in the way, so I sort of stepped out of the way, and I said, would you like me to take a photograph? And she sort of said, oh gosh, thank you. And then my sweet partner, bless him, spoke up and said, you know who she is, don't you? And I was like, and this young gal said, no. And he said, oh, she's the one who designed all of this. And she went, no, really? And I said, David, leave it alone. And this is my partner, who's also a David, fondly referred to as nighttime David as opposed to daytime David. Anyway, I said, no, leave it alone. She said, no, really? Are you really the costume designer? And I said, yes. And she said, can I show you something? And I said, of course. She went onto her phone and she said, my best friend just made this. She's heavily into cosplay. And she pulled up a photograph on her phone. And one of her friends had already done the most unbelievable duplicate of Annabeth's armor I have ever seen.
Oh, cool. Like her chariot armor from the chariot race?
Yes.
Amazing.
It was, the detail, the owl, the proportions, unbelievable. Unbelievable. So I'm excited, if I'm able to go to Comic-Con in San Diego. The Costume Designers Guild, which I'm a member of and I'm on the board, we have a booth there on the main floor every year, which is, if you're ever in LA around, actually in San Diego, around that time of the year. So I'm curious to see how many people decide to be Sirens wandering around in a siren costume might be a bit of a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you about the siren costume because that was another one we saw early on, and you told us about all the intricacies of it, and
Uh,
you showed us all the barnacles and everything that were on it. And I think what was really fascinating about this one is that you said it was a real collaboration between many of the departments. You have the costuming department, you had the props department, and then you had the stunt team involved because to do
and
the
yeah,
leaning over and everything, they had to do stunts.
yeah.
So obviously the siren stuff was incredible and people went wild for it. What's the story of the dress and how it had them be able to form into rocks and all of that?
Dan Hanna had wanted it to be a lava pool, and he was very clear about that. And again, there was some very early concept art from when they thought it was going to be CGI, which was much more, I would say, it wasn't as organic, it wasn't as lava, it was more sort of Mount Rushmore, it was more geometric.
Okay.
But then when they started talking about the pool, and Kat, our director, started talking about them being able to shrink into themselves and do all this movement, and she wanted crabs and live crabs and all of that sort of thing, then that went, oh, okay, so we know they have to be harnessed, we know they need to shrink. How do we sculpt that? How do we make that work? And Tanis, who oversaw all of the specialty costume overseeing, so she worked with me very closely on the giants. So she was a big part. And we tried different bases. We tried a spiral version. And then I said, well, what happens if we do a hoop skirt so that it's almost like those wooden Chinese dolls that fit inside themselves?
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
So we
Gotcha.
tried both. We knew it had to be in two pieces. So it was like, okay, it's basically a skirt and a bodice. And then how do you cover those in a way that they don't any longer look like a skirt and a bodice? So we got the harness from a wonderful stunt team. We knew we had to cover that. We knew that had to fit. And then we literally started experimenting with things. And then yet again, dear David, I was like, I need you to find a wool or a fabric that's textured that looks like black and gray rock. Have fun.
Okay.
We looked in Vancouver and we couldn't find it in Vancouver. And then we looked at, well, what happens if we make the fabric? And I was like, well, if we don't have to make the fabric, we're one step ahead, because we knew we were going to have to carve all the rocks. And then Tanis came up with the idea of going down to the art department, who were doing the whole set and all of the lava. And they literally took a cast from part of the rock that the art department were carving. And then they brought it upstairs, and then they made a mold, and they made what I referred to as lava lace.
Okay.
So it was rubberized and had holes in it, and they sliced it very, very, very thinly. And then that got added onto the fabric, which David found. He said, you won't believe this, but I've actually found a fabric, and it's lighter gray on one side and darker gray on the other, and it's kind of textured and nubbly and looks a bit like, I was like, send it up here.
Beautiful.
But then they just kept adding stuff onto it. So actually it was, yes, you're right, it was the stunt department, it was the art department, it was the set decorating department, because they already had barnacles they had made for Percy's cabin.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay, that's so
Right?
fun.
So the barnacles, and they had done them in different sizes, and they already had boxes of those left over. So Hamish showed up and sort of put this big box on my desk and said, I think you need barnacles. Boom.
We have spare barnacles for you to
We have,
reuse. That's
as one
great.
does, right?
Look, environmentally friendly, right? Reduce, reuse.
And then one of Tanis's team carved all of the shells and the limpets, because we didn't use anything real. And then one of her other team made the starfish and the seaweed. And then it all went into...
Oh, right, the seaweed. Yeah, I
breakdown,
forgot.
the
Yeah.
seaweed.
Oh, it was so cool.
And then it all
Yeah.
got stitched and glued, and then it got sprayed. And they were building the set inside, but we filmed it outside. So then once it was built in sections, it all got shipped outside. But it meant that we were able to go downstairs to where you went through, where the mill was, while they were still carving the rocks and building the platforms that our sirens went into. So we could work out exactly where their rocks were and where our rocks were. and then
Okay.
made sure that people could actually twist and go down into the rocks.
Very fun. Very, very
And each
fun.
one of them
Oh,
was different. I don't know if you know
yeah.
this, but the stunt coordinator, he switched two of the stunt performers. So
Mhm.
the one that was here moved over here and vice versa. And we tried it literally late afternoon, the day before they worked, was the first time we saw it all in together. And I called him in panic and I said, Eli, you have to move them back. And he said, why? I said, because each one of those costumes is actually slightly different, and how they crumple down is different. And the rocks around them are different. So they can't scrunch unless they're in their right place. He was like, oh, all right then.
And I
He was
am
like,
someone
ah,
who like grew up going to the beach all the time. My wife and I travel, we go to the beach all the time, and we'll do a lot of like coastal walks. We were just in Australia, New Zealand, doing a bunch of coastal walks, and you'll see these kind of craggly rocks and barnacles and all this kind of stuff, and it just felt so real. Like, you want to talk about the
good.
believability, like it just felt so true to what you're trying to do. And both seeing it in person when we were there, it already looked incredible. But then when you see it on the screen with the proper
Yeah.
lighting and the effects and all of that, like, it
And
just,
yeah.
it just looks
And the
so
mist
good.
and the steam and yeah.
Yeah. Oh, just fascinating. Just so fun. Well, we're running low on time, so there's one final outfit that I really wanted to ask you about. And I think this is one that is on a very different end of the spectrum, where it's not all these intricacies in terms of the rocks and the ocean and all this stuff, but it's one that I think had a lot of anticipation. Thalia gets introduced in this season, and we all know that Thalia is our big punk rock friend that we all love. And I was excited to see what that meant in terms of what she was wearing. So when you were putting together punk rock Thalia outfit, especially when you're going for the actor being British, I think there's a whole nother British punk rock scene that comes to mind with,
Yeah.
bands like The Clash. What all went into Thalia's costuming?
Well, once I knew it was who was playing Thalia, and you wanted to be badass, and yes, she wants to have it, then it had to be, I was like, it has to be English. It
Yeah.
has to be quintessential English 90s. And really, there's only one way to go with that. And what's fun about that is that, bless her, she sent me a mood board. We talked on the phone, and
Oh, with Tamara, who plays
yeah,
Thalia?
once
Oh, cool.
Tamara was cast, and we have a sort of very odd connection. Lance, who played Zeus in season
Right.
one, I knew Lance quite well,
Oh,
and
wow.
he was on a television show called Bosch,
Okay.
based on Michael Connolly's books, and played the police chief. And so I had worked with Lance for about 2 years, and then I'd gone on to another show. And Tamara had done a film with Lance. Tamara actually did Lance's last film. I think you know this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Lance's wife, Stephanie, who I also know, who had recommended that they look at Tamara. And so when Tamara got cast, it was very emotional. I had been at Lance's memorial service and found out that Tamara had been there too. So we'd been in the same room at the same time. We just didn't know each other at that time. Once I knew it was her, I said, I really think there's only one way to go with this. And I just brought in research that was English, punk, 90s. It has to be black. I mean, the biggest conversation was which red and black plaid shirt would be
Right.
tied
It's
around.
got to be red and black. Got to be red
It
and
had
black
to be
plaid,
red and
but
black,
just
and
which
it had to
pattern?
be, yeah, which type of check or pattern was it going to be, and making sure that it was the right color red. And so when she came in, I did have some choices for her, because she came in quite close to where we actually need to film her with her. But she sort of put it on, and we tried a bunch of different ways, and then she literally just tied it around her waist and just sort of stood there. And we added some more silver jewelry, and I was like, yeah,
Nailed
there
it.
she is.
Mm-hmm. That was good. The jewelry was great. I believe she also had like it was like a jeweled version of like a big safety pin, like not an actual safety pin, but like an accessory
Yeah.
safety pin, which
Yeah,
is just such a classic teenage
so
punk rock
classic.
thing to do. Like, I want the safety pin look without actually using a safety pin.
Yep. And Jeannie did a great job on that, our hairstylist.
Right.
Yeah, it was and then the piece where she's wrapped in the vines. I think in the book she's actually in a straitjacket. And we all agreed that that was a different piece of messaging. And it's one thing if you read it on a page, it's another thing when you see it visually. So
That makes
that's where
sense.
we started to play with the roots and the vines of the inside of the tree binding her up for that little flash,
Yeah, I think that makes more
which I
sense.
think was made a lot more sense. I mean, it's just one of those things where
Hmm.
the difference between visually and when you're reading something is slightly different.
Yeah.
Um,
And talking with Thalia and also with Zeus, you had to make decisions in terms of like what the costuming of the new actor playing Zeus would look like. And it's already established what Zeus wore in season one, but now obviously with Lance's tragic passing, you have to deal with a new actor. What kind of factors go into, do we want to just give him the exact same look? Do we want to give a different look to make it distinct that like this is not the same person?
it's not, and I think it would have been a disservice to Courtney if we had. The good news is we were also outside, and it was night, and FYI, it was freezing.
Okay. I mean, it looked cold
It was
from just
cold.
watching it. Okay.
It was very, very cold that night, and it's visually spectacular, but you're up on a hill,
Sure.
and it's Vancouver, and it's November. And Courtney, to his credit, I mean, outside of the graciousness with which he asked for 2 minutes of silence and was in honor of Vance, was very clear that it was a transition, which sort of left us all in tears. He also needed to make it his own. So yes, you'd still be smart and you'd still be elegant and you'd still be Zeus. But a top coat made sense because you're outside.
Hmm. And then that the hat felt like a big choice. Was that I guess that's the kind of thing where it's like Lance was not wearing one in season one. The hat still fits with the vibe. Pinstripes is obviously the Zeus motif in the
Yes.
books. So was that a conscious choice of this kind
There
of
was
sets it
definitely, yes.
as a
Yeah. And
different
I gave,
person?
and
Okay.
I gave, we were all acutely aware that it was going to be sensitive for everybody. And at the same time, the only correct thing to do was to be respectful of our new actor coming in and taking on the role. But the last thing you wanted to ask any actor to do was to pretend to be somebody they weren't.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think it was
But
handled well. I think
I
it
think it
looked
worked really
good.
nicely. I think it worked
Yeah,
very, very nicely.
it's one of those things where you get a very clear picture of what Zeus is, similar to like we're saying with Luke. You get a clear picture of what Zeus's closet looks like,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels like he has many different iterations of black pinstripe suits, dark
Right.
colors. He's got that kind of old school early 1900s vibe, and I think that when I saw him on screen, I was like, yeah, that's Zeus. That feels
Yeah,
right. And then I'm sure you saw, but at I think the London premiere, Tamara wore Lance's tie that he had worn
she
in
did.
season one
Yeah.
as her premiere outfit, which is just such a beautiful, wholesome moment. And I'm glad that his legacy gets to be honored in this season and as the show continues, I'm sure.
Lance was an extraordinary. He was also a brilliant pianist.
I'm
Yeah.
unsurprised.
Yeah.
Unsurprised. What a guy.
Yeah. I was just. I think season 2 of Bosch, we were filming at a house, and there was a piano, and I came to the set, just to establish everything and make sure everybody was okay in the morning. And I came in, and there's this beautiful piece of music being played, and then the whole crew has sort of stopped, and I'm looking around, and there's Lance just playing on the piano. I mean, really playing on the piano. Just this
Awesome.
gorgeous, gorgeous piece of classical music. Yeah.
Awesome.
So,
Incredible stuff. Oh, well, thank you for sharing. And thank you for taking the time to talk to me and share all this lovely behind the scenes info with the listeners of the show. I really appreciate it. I have found costuming to be so fascinating ever since I heard Tish talk about all the work that went into picking the correct color of orange for the Camp Half Blood shirts. So when we got to learn more from you at set, I was over the moon, and I was so delighted that you responded to my message that we could talk more here for the podcast. So, Kate, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Is there anything you want to promote out to the folks? Anything if they want to either see, work that you've got on something going on or anything else before we wrap up here?
well, you're very sweet. I am on Instagram, and I don't post perhaps as frenetically or as aggressively as some people.
Probably the healthy approach.
I don't know how people do it, but I do love what I do. And I do appreciate people like yourself that are curious and explain more of the detail and the work and the world that people like myself and my teams inhabit. I think it's very easy to watch something and just go, oh, okay, it's clothes. But it doesn't matter whether it's something as detailed and extraordinary as my gift of designing Percy, or if it's contemporary clothing, which can actually be as difficult, if not more difficult, because more people think they know what they're doing and they have an opinion about it. We try and put symbolism and story and have things make sense. Sometimes we do it in 3 minutes or less. So perhaps to any of the people who watch your podcasts, if they're critical of something, maybe that's valid, or maybe somebody had 3 minutes to put it together. I used to be a lot more critical when I designed theatre, and then I was like, oh, maybe they only had 5 minutes to actually change that. I just finished, sadly, because I couldn't go back to Percy for a number of reasons. I just finished doing, because completely different, I just finished doing a limited series for Amazon on Joseph of Egypt.
Oh, wow, very different.
Joseph and the coat. So 1700, 1750 BCE. So I learned far more about Egyptian clothing and rectangles and Canaanites than I ever thought I might.
There you go.
So that's a complete change of gears, and I think that probably won't come out till next year. But
it's
sort of Succession on crack, based on, I mean, honestly, they sort of have everything in there.
Amazing. Wow. Well, I can't think of a better pitch for the show than that.
Well, that is actually a direct quote from my showrunner on that. But I was very sad not to be able to figure out going back to Percy.
Well, maybe you'll be back for season 4 or 5, or if not, I think the legacy of what you've established in season 2 will definitely live on. Just like, you carried the torch of Tish, I'm sure whoever is next will be carrying your torch, and it'll all be wonderful, and things will continue on. But the work you did was incredible.
Thank you. The costume designer who's taken over, designer who's taken over, Jennifer, is lovely, and she's very talented, and we know a number of friends in common. So, and curiously, she often works in New Mexico, in Albuquerque. And so I was working with a lot of the people that she often works with in Albuquerque, and she was working with a lot of people that I often work with in. So you see, it's a very small family.
It's fun. It's good. I'm glad there's crossover there and everything. Awesome. So, well, anyway. If people want to find your Instagram that you mentioned, it's at kate.adair, I believe.
Yes. CATE.ADAIR. Yes.
Amazing. Fun follow. Good to see the behind the scenes stuff. If you enjoyed this chat, give Kate a follow and you'll get to learn even more. But Kate, thank you so much for taking the time. Listeners, thank you all for listening. And until next time, when I guess I get Jennifer on to ask her more questions as I'm keeping this streak going of trying to interview all the costume designers. Until then, I'll see you later.
Okay, take care of yourself, Mike. Thank you so much. All right.